It's time to highlight another awesome indie shmup that's as bad to the bone as I am buff.
Why are you wearing a muscle suit? Have you gone mental?
Not quite. It's because this week we're featuring Super XYX, a beefy, old school style shooter with a penchant for Herculean physique like the Greek gods of old.
Super XYX has been over a decade in the making and an homage to classic shooters from the 90s. Created by Gryzor, the developer of over a dozen shmups dating back to the 2000s, Super XYX is a culmination, the magnum opus of what he wanted to create from the very beginning. So much so that for this review I have a special treat in store with the help of the amazing Ubio, both a tester for the game and an indispensable resource to the shmup community. We went straight to the source for an interview with Gryzor, the developer himself, and sussed out all sorts of nuggets about the game's lore, development history, and how it came to be. And as an added bonus, he's gifted us with a free download code for the game. So stay tuned toward the end of the video where I'll tell you how to enter to win a free copy of Super XYX.
So are you ready to gore with a cornucopia of cyborgs, fantasy, mythology in a 90s style arcade shooter? I'm ready!
My first impression when firing up SuperXYX is how much the art style was influenced by the Amiga and Commodore PC gaming scene of the 90s. Games that I also grew up either playing on my PC or, in the case of the Amiga, drooling over screenshots. There was a thriving, underground digital art scene during those days, with heavy cyborg and fantasy themes, and SuperXYX nails it with a vibrant take on the art style. From the title font to the score pages, it has the look of playing a souped-up version of an old PC favorite. If you're a fan of the NG DevTeam games, you'll also immediately notice the similarity to their designs, and that's no coincidence. Gryzor worked for NG DevTeam, not only on their release of NeoXYX for the Neo Geo and Dreamcast, but also on other games like Gunlord. In fact, Gryzor has been slowly building towards SuperXYX for some time. His original games were created via Blastworks on the Wii, the first being XYX, or is it XYX? You go pronounce that. And you can already see the DNA of what eventually became SuperXYX, like the design of these motherships, right down to the cyborg faces at the bow. And if you look at this list of the games in the series, you can see the clear YX motif in all of the names. I always wondered why the games had these odd names, so we asked, and it turns out it's not what you'd expect at all. Gryzor literally wanted to create difficult names to be funny and see how people try to pronounce them. That tells me I've got license to call them whatever I want, and the funnier the better. So XYX it is. GoryGYX came next and was a spin-off in terms of side-scrolling gameplay. The name is not a coincidence, as the game has an organic gore theme to its design, influenced by Abadox, Lifeforce, and R-Type. Gryzor continued to use Blastworks with YX3 Twin Tigers, the next step in the series, and with a clear inspiration from games like Fireshark. You can see both the tank and water stages coming together, which would ultimately become stages 2 and 3 in SuperXYX. Later moving to the Desimon 2 platform, his next creation, YX4, allowed for improvements in the pixel art. Many assets like these green ships swooping down and scaling into the screen were already present here. The Tiger Bomb, that later makes an appearance in NeoXYX, is here as well, with a nice digital roar to signify its presence. Your Hell Tiger ship is already looking very similar to its final iteration, and this enemy ship from Stage 2 is near identical to its final revision. If you look at this concept art from XYX, you can see how Gryzor had this vision from the beginning, as their final look in SuperXYX is so similar to his original intent. In 2012, Gryzor took all of his previous work and officially released his XYX demo using GameMaker. A major leap in both graphics and gameplay, it was a clear direction for what would ultimately become his final game. Even the music, composed by Rockin, was a step up and a clear direction for the series. One interesting difference are the characters. While the ships are already in their near final form, XYX went with buxom, bodacious vixens with a penchant for the voluptuous, versus the mostly masculine, muscular, Adonis-like heroes of SuperXYX, although Yellowjacket remained in her final form. However, after releasing the 3-stage demo, the game was put on hold by Gryzor until further notice. Finally, in 2013, working in tandem with NG DevTeam, he was able to realize the next phase in his vision, and one of my favorite Neo Geo shooters, SuperXYX. Taking his digital artwork to the next level, and with the help of the additional programming resources, SuperXYX took his previous work and combined it as a complete experience. Even the organic, gory influence of gory gigs can be seen in some enemies and bosses. The gameplay is fast and furious, and something I own and still play on my Dreamcast. However, in Gryzor's mind, all was not as he wanted it to be. NG DevTeam being the driving force and having creative control, their preference was for the cybernetic, and many of Gryzor's fantasy themes and designs were replaced with robotic forms. The dragons and lava stage that he wanted to implement never came to be. Moreover, the timeline didn't allow him to implement many other important features, from many more character ships, additional game modes, and importantly, a true last boss to achieve when certain conditions were met. And while a black label version of SuperXYX was originally planned, due to time constraints, it never came to fruition. For their part, NG DevTeam were kind and cooperative and allowed Gryzor to continue and make his super revision. As long as he didn't reuse assets from SuperXYX, he was free to do as he pleased. Of course, developing the game isn't easy, so circa 2014, Gryzor teamed up with Team Grybanzer Fox, already responsible for games like Xenodeath, Xenodyne R, and Jetbuster, designed and programmed by Kaiser from their team. With coding and design help from Kaiser of Grybanzer Fox, Gryzor went to work, and what you see before you is his final, or at least latest release, with all the features he always dreamed of including. It is in fact Gryzor's ideal and original vision of the game. After being removed from SuperXYX, the lava stage makes its debut, with dragons as the major enemy types, and the dragon matriarch as the stage boss. Alright, enough with the history lesson, as I'm sure you want to know, how does it play? I heard it's like Toaplan games. Well, yes and no. It certainly has the look of Tatsujin with beefy ships and enemies. The bullets also move pretty fast, so dodging is often anticipated in advance. And it has all sorts of homages to the games of old. It also has the familiar pacing of later Toaplan games like Batsugan. The stages are short and compact, not lasting more than a few minutes before it's on to the boss. That makes the game easily replayable in short bursts and addicting to give another go when learning the game. But unlike games like Tatsujin and Twin Cobra, SuperXYX has a unique element not present in most Toaplan shmups. Playing SuperXYX is about aggression and playing on top of your enemies, killing them as quickly as possible before they can even attack. So much so that most enemy sprites cannot actually kill you, only their bullets can. Not only can you literally play on top of your enemies, but you're rewarded for doing so. Try doing that in Tatsujin, Twin Cobra, or Batsugan, and see how far you get. Toaplan games are based on rhythm and anticipating enemy patterns and fire, and many of the enemies are bullet sponges, so you need to learn how to dodge their patterns as you slowly whittle away their health. Not so in SuperXYX. You can destroy most enemies, even powerful ones, before they have a chance to fire, if you play aggressively and eliminate them by point blanking. In actuality, SuperXYX plays like many compile shooters, where eliminating threats the moment they appear is how it's meant to be played. Another unique feature I really appreciated was the slow button, which I mapped to a trigger to use in short bursts. It also works perfectly for carefully positioning your ship directly over slower enemies and following their movement to stay in position. I used it regularly in spots like hovering over the dragon heads for some quick kills. I wouldn't say the game is a Toaplan clone at all, more just influenced by it in graphics and many homages in the design. It does have the DNA, but it's more a mix of those games and compiled shooters, featuring the latter's more aggressive playstyle. Once I started approaching the game like an extended caravan mode, where the moment you see an enemy you want to get on top of it for a super quick kill, I saw instant results. This also made Cobra, the final unlockable ship, my favorite to use. It doesn't have much of a spread shot and isn't easy to use when not powered up, but it's by far the most powerful, rewarding aggressive play. Once you know where enemies will come from and you can be on top of them as they appear, it's absolutely devastating. One of my other favorite unlockables is Grybanzer, a strip bunny with a giant sock in his tarantarats. It's a straight homage to an old 90s shooter, Tyrian, where you can pilot an actual carrot ship. Tyrian is also an example of the 90s style PC shooter that SuperXYX very much feels like you're playing, both in graphics and feel. I also see a clear Gun Nac influence with the homing shots being very similar to the guided boomerangs, not to mention the bunny theme as well. It's an excellent ship for the harder special stages that have high enemy density. SuperXYX is old school through and through, only with a very new coat of paint. For the truly hardcore, it even has a Gryzor mode, which implements checkpoints as if you were playing Tatsujin and eliminates the respawn, and it goes from there. All of the really cool modes are unlockable once goals in the game are completed. That includes a boss rush and a super arcade mode, which I found to be my absolute favorite. Super Arcade is a completely unique set of 3 long stages, each with mid-bosses and a stage boss. They move faster and the bullet density and enemy count is greater. It feels even closer to a compile shooter. It's a high-octane blast. See how far you can get. So of course I loved it. If the regular stages move a bit slow for your taste and you like an all-out assault, these levels are for you. A very cool addition that Gryzor wanted in NeoZyX but couldn't yet implement. Another hidden gem that's worth discovering is the Gauntlet mode, only unlocked by defeating stage 1 and 2 without death, and then picking up a secret bonus on stage 3. Once you do, and complete the level without more than a death, you'll enter the Gauntlet area, comprised of completely unique enemy patterns and special bosses that you won't see anywhere else. Not only does it live up to its name, but is the key to unlocking the true last boss. As you complete sections, you'll be showered with literal cornucopias for the big points in making it through the stage. If you look closely, you'll see some of the gifts bestowed upon you are nods to the era, with Mega Drive, NES, and 7800 cards mixed in among the fruits and desserts. In fact, legend has it that if you look even closer, you'll spot an occasional porn mag or two. Because if you grew up in the 80s and early 90s, before internet, that and Skinamax was the only action you'd be seeing anytime soon. So I had to keep replaying the footage over again trying to find it. I haven't had to look that hard for porn since I was in middle school. Turns out it was later removed in a revision. All that work wasted. Talk about blue balls. What you see here are the actual assets he later sent me, so I could at least get some satisfaction. Once the gauntlet is complete, you can then continue with the game, and at the end, you'll be met with a long and complex battle of attrition, as any TLB should be. And if you can manage to pull it off, the gauntlet mode will unlock to play anytime you choose. Now, if the gameplay isn't as Toaplan as you expected, the soundtrack most certainly is. Without a doubt, some of the tunes are Toaplan through and through, and will bring back fond memories for anyone that's played them before. The first time you hear the bonus stage music with its digitized snare drums, you'll immediately be reminded of Hellfire and that opening level. And indeed, the title of the track you're hearing now is called Hellfire. All the game music was composed by Carina, using the YM2151, the same one used in many arcade games of the late 80s and 90s to give it that raw, authentic sound. The first stage music was composed long ago by Rockin for the original XYX game, and Carina created the remix here as an homage to the first in the series. Most of the tracks have that Mega Drive shooter flair, so if you're getting the warm and fuzzies, the Yamaha FM synth and cool compositions by Carina are a big part of that. It may not completely play like a Toaplan classic, but it certainly does sound like one. Music is a critical part of a good shooter and what puts you in the right mood for each stage and boss. The Stage 6 track, Galactic Attack, is also one of my favorite and perfectly encapsulates playing something like Tatsujin. If this game feels like a Toaplan classic, you have Carina and the well-done, nostalgic soundtrack to thank for it. As you probably know, I'm certainly no score junkie when it comes to most games, but I do want to quickly explain how it works. The scoring system in SuperXYX is pretty straightforward, but actually adds a good bit of depth to the gameplay once you've mastered it and find it easy to clear. The most important aspect of the game's scoring are the medals released when enemies are killed and how they affect your combo counter. Like most other games, the combo counter increases as you kill enemies, and if there's too long a gap or if you die, it resets. In SuperXYX, the medals from destroyed enemies function as combo counter resets, and that every time you pick one up, it delays the reset of the combo. So instead of simply grabbing medals as they appear for points, the trick is to only pick them up as needed and leave them floating until there's a break in enemies so you can keep your combo counter from resetting. That changes the gameplay quite a bit and adds longevity for anyone looking to play for score. The combo counter has tiers, shown here on the screen, so the higher your combo, the larger your multiplier for all the medals that are collected. Weak Bosan shows it expertly in this clip as he keeps his combo counter from resetting throughout the entire stage by picking up medals at the right moments. Timing your medal pickups and not dying to keep your combo going is the key mechanic in the scoring system. Aside from the unique scoring system, SuperXYX sticks to most of its old school roots, for better or worse. With the conveniences of modern games, some features come to be expected and are absent here, making it just about as tough to learn as any of the old school shooters we used to play. There's no training mode to select stages or bosses that you've reached. No way to practice a level directly. You have a boss rush, but you can't choose one to practice. So if you need to practice the final boss, you gotta get through all the others first. Of all the gripes that I could have, the majority are not related to the game itself, but the obtuse menu system. There's certainly no lack of options, with cool features like seeing your hitbox, turning sound levels and effects up and down, and a couple difficulty modes. That being said, the two modes, standard and challenging, are not that different from each other, so another super mode that can give shmup veterans an even more serious challenge would be a welcome addition. The controller adjustments can also be a pain, with no way to know how the keys you select are mapping to your pad, resulting in some trial and error before I got my gamepad mapped the way I wanted. The interface is simply not intuitive to get around and takes a bit of getting used to. Certainly not a deal breaker, but something to be prepared for. It's also missing any kind of sound test if you wanted to listen to the cool tracks. Aside from the menus, my only point of contention with the gameplay itself is that almost every boss in the game can be too easily exploited. From stages 2 through 5, every boss can be killed and worked around without any challenge by simply destroying them in a specific way. An example are the stage 2 tank bosses, where simply hovering over them makes you immune to any damage that they can do and takes the fun out of it. This is acceptable for stage enemies, as figuring out the best ways and routes to kill them quickly is part of the challenge, but the big bad stage bosses shouldn't be nerfed. You would come across these kinds of little tricks in many old games, but it was often an isolated boss or an incident, so it was like the neat trick that you found on that one boss. In this case, too many bosses suffer from that glitch, so I'd personally like to see it updated, or at least in the more difficult setting of challenging that removes your ability to cheese them in that way. With all that being said, how many points would one knock off from a review for these minor complaints that I just mentioned? Especially when the game itself is so unique and offers quite a few unlockable and extended modes for you to enjoy. On top of that, as of this video, SuperXYX only costs $10 on Steam. How absurd is that? A beautiful shmup with a killer soundtrack and many hours of enjoyment for that price is outrageous. Run, don't walk, and download it for $10. This game is easily worth triple that in my eyes, and even full price if you added some convenience features, training modes, and some minor glitches were fixed. SuperXYX is one of the few modern shmups to give you a legit old school gaming experience. It's not insanely challenging unless you want it to be, but deep enough to enjoy unlocking the special modes, characters, and the true last boss. And it's a labor of love by a veteran of the shmup community that's been over a decade in the making. You have people falling over themselves, paying exorbitant amounts of money to play NeoZyX because it's rare and unavailable. And this updated, more complete release only sells for $10. How do we support the shmup community and ensure we get more great games? By putting our money where our mouth is. When a truly cool game comes along, that's worth supporting.
Speaking of new and cool shmups, Gryzor has been hard at work on its next release, and it looks absolutely bitchin'. It's called ZPF, short for Zippy Fantasy, and it's for the Mega Drive, as if someone made one of the coolest looking Mega Drive shooters that you've ever seen. So check out this trailer for ZPF, it looks awesome. And then check out some of the other cool shmups made by Grybanzer Fox. And when you're done, go check out Super XYX. Download the demo, and if you enjoy it, support the shmup community by picking it up for yourself. Okay, as promised, in honor of my channel now reaching 2,000 subs, wow, here's how you can win a free copy of Super XYX. As always, make sure that you're subbed to my channel, like the video, and leave a comment with the following secret code. Ready? Shmups are shooters. What? I already used that one? What can I say? I wasn't feeling very creative. It was either that or shmupgasm. So leave the comment and enter for a chance to win. If you enjoyed this kind of indie spotlight, you can check out the last one I did for another game called Wings of Blue Star. Another awesome indie shmup. Very well worth checking out. And you can do that right here. And until next time, smoke 'em if you got 'em. You'd like that, wouldn't you?
But yeah, that's all, folks.